TFL EV is brought to you by Flow Charger, maker of reliable, high-quality charging stations for your electric vehicle.
Hi, now you're in our video officially.
All right, pleasure meeting. Have a great hike.
Yep, pleasure meeting you guys. Take care. Bye. Bye. So guys, welcome to this TFL EV off-road video. And as you can tell, I'm in something very special. It's, of course, the biggest, the baddest, the most expensive electric truck on the market today. I'm talking about the Hummer EV. In this video, we're going to go take it for a ride. We're going to talk about what's good. We're going to talk about what's bad. But since this is on TFL EV, be assured that we took it off-road yesterday up a very difficult course called Red Cone here in the Colorado mountains. And that video will be on TFL Off-Road, but it's going to take a little bit of time to edit that video. So let's start with this vehicle and let's take it for a ride and let's talk about if it's any good or not off-road. But before we do that, let's talk about it as an electric vehicle. Now, there are 3 electric trucks, and I've been lucky enough to take all 3 of them off-road. Of course, Rivian, which you just saw, we had that for a week. There's also the Lightning, which we own. And now there's this one, which GMC was kind enough to lend us to go and test it. Now, we're doing a whole bunch of videos with this. If you've been watching this channel, you'll know that we also did a charging test, and it hit an incredible number. I'm not going to tell you, but I've never seen a vehicle hit that high of a number, and that's partially because it has an 800 volt system, unlike that Rivian, which has a 400 volt. Now, that doesn't mean it's better or worse. It just means it charges a little bit quicker. Now, it does have a big old battery, over 200 kilowatt hours, and the Rivian, of course, has 4 motors. This has 3. Now, as any proper electric truck should have, it has a frunk. So let me pop that open for you so you can see it. There it goes. And if I'm out of breath, it's because we're up here at over 10,000 feet in elevation. And the frunk is smaller than the Lightning, maybe about the same size as the Rivians. Liftover isn't too bad because, of course, the grill comes up with the rest of the hood, which is nice, but mainly it's used to store, wondering what that is, to store these panels. So this is the only electric truck that is like a Jeep Wrangler, and that is that it's right now a convertible, or maybe not convertible, but certainly a T-top.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm good. I'm just showing. Thank you for asking. Nice people here. So let me close that. Once again, it closes. Oops, I gotta keep my finger on it. Sorry. Let's try it again. There we go. Come on, close. Ian makes you keep your finger on the fob until it closes. Now in this video, I'm going to show you what's good and bad about it. And like I said, we took it off-road up up actually Red Cone yesterday, and this is called Deer Creek, this trail. You can visit our friends at Onyx Off-Road and find it on your map. It's actually a relatively easy off-road trail, but nevertheless, you need good ground clearance, good approach angle. So let's talk about the 3 different trucks and how this fits in the hierarchy of off-road electric trucks. So like I said, we own the Ford Lightning, and that has only about 10 inches of ground clearance. And actually, we tried taking it up here about a month ago and quickly ran out of ground clearance, so we turned around. Not good. As an off-roader, it's got about the same amount of ground clearance as a Subaru Outback, so light off-roading, maybe taking it up to your cabin, but certainly nothing that involves, big rocks or serious approach, departure, breakover angles. And if you're wondering, this truck does have a tailgate. It's not powered, unlike the Lightnings, but it does have the ability let me show you, to do this, which then turns into a step if you actually lower it all the way. I can probably do that by hitting the button. Come on, open up. Okay, that one, hit the big button, maybe hit the small button. Okay, come on, there we go. And now let's hit the big button. And then there, and then push down, and there you go. Now you've got your step to get into the truck. A handhold over there. It's quite handy. The downside, of course, is, as you can readily see, if I wasn't shooting into the sun, that this, for an off-road truck, has a spare tire, then unfortunately has to be mounted into the bed, which takes up a lot of space in the bed. And that's not grand. But that's the way GM designed it, unlike the Rivian, which actually has the tire underneath the bed. And of course the Ford Lightning, which has the tire underneath there. Now, speaking of towing, which I'm not, this one tows 7,500 pounds. I love these beefy recovery hooks. They are just so big and beefy looking. We're rolling on 35s, and perhaps just as importantly for an off-road truck, we're looking at air suspension. And this truck, believe it or not, in its extract mode, will raise itself up to about 16 inches, which is crazy. That is really incredible for off-roading, to have 16 inches of ground clearance. And I would love to put 37s on this just to see how that would look. I'm sure people have already done that. It's got to be a cool look. All right, so let's go inside and let's talk about the interior. In the back here, I don't think it's quite full-size truck, but we can find out. Let me see here. So I'm sitting behind myself. Plenty of legroom, plenty of headroom, lots of light through these panels. By the way, those are plastic. So good amount of room. Not quite up to a full-size truck spec, but nevertheless good. You've got your USB and USB-C, van, temperature control. So we've got a 3-zone temperature, and of course cup holder, armrest. Just a nice place. People say that these seats are relatively firm, and I agree. If you have a recent Silverado, we had a Trail Boss for a while. They're very similar to that. A little bit nicer looking, but very similar to the Trail Boss. All right. So let me do this, since we're in the sun and it's hard to see. I'm gonna start this guy up. I'm gonna pull into the shade so I can show you some of the features of this truck before we compare it to the Rivian, which I can do as well. So let me start it up. Push button start, of course. Come on, start up. There we go. Come on, drive. We'll go into the shade here so I can show you some of the off-road goodies that this has. All right, so here we are in the shade. So like I was saying, this has a giant battery. In fact, I think the largest of any electric truck by far, over 200 kilowatt hours. And if I got my off-road mode right now, 2 lockers, front and rear. This shows you, but let's just see what kind of electricity use I'm getting here. See if it's in this one. No, we don't want the music. Turn that off. Energy use and start. That doesn't helpful. Suspension travel. Blank page. There we go. Look at that number. Driving up the mountain, 1.1 miles per kilowatt hour. That's pretty crazy, isn't it? But yeah, that's what happens when you have a truck, and we just weighed it over a TFL truck that weighs 9,500, well, almost 9,500 pounds. It was like 9,400 with the spare tire. Pretty crazy. Here are my off-road pages here as well. And probably the coolest thing that I've never seen before on any vehicle is, let me go to the camera. And so you've got all kinds of different cameras here. So you've got your front, you got your back, you got your bird's eye view, you got your side view, you got your hitch view, and my favorite, of course, is this one, which is the underneath view, both front and back. And the coolest thing about the underneath view, there's a camera actually underneath this, is you can push this button and spray it off so you can see. How cool is that? yeah, that is pretty wild and wacky. Now we can see what's underneath us. So if you're about to run over a big stone, and then over here you've got your different terrain modes. So let me put it into off-road mode, which it should be in, but let's just make sure we're in off-road mode. Okay, now we are in off-road mode. Got it. And then the other thing we want to do is raise the suspension up into off-road mode, and that should be there. So that's normal mode. Let's take it up. Increased. So now the Air suspension should kind of come up a little bit. I hear the, there it goes. I can hear it working. I hear the air suspension lifting us. And there's one more height that's above this. But yeah, it's pretty crazy. You also have rear locker and a front locker. Unlike the Rivian, this has 3 motors, not 4, not on each wheel. The one thing that is kind of weird is we've had this truck for less than a week, and already this heated steering wheel button seems to have given up the ghost. And then, of course, there's kind of some plastic bits. And I say that because this is an expensive truck. I mean, let me rephrase that. When this came out, $112,000 for the first edition seemed like a boatload of money. But since that time, the Lightning can now be had at over about $100,000. You can probably spec a Rivian up to $100,000 as well. And so it's no longer that crazy of a number at 112. The one thing that I'm not happy about, and I'll show you something we found out, is it does have underbody protection, but there are these big bolts, let me show you underneath, that stick out. I would prefer to see just a regular flat skid plate as opposed to bolts that can get caught up on things. Of course, independent suspension all around, and there are those big air suspension. Let me show you in the back. Now, I said that there's 2 things about this truck that make it good and bad off-road. The best thing, a complete and utter game changer, is in the back here. We'll show you when we go for a ride, but it has rear wheel steering. You've probably heard of crab mode, where both wheels go in the same phase. In other words, they turn both the same way. But rear wheel steering is a complete game changer in that it makes this giant truck maneuverable. Because let's face it, it's as wide as a heavy-duty truck on tight trails, especially tight trails that we have here in Colorado. So let me show you the downside, which is just how wide it is. So we'll take this on the trail, pop up above tree line. Let's see how high we are. Altitude 11,000. Wow, that's no wonder I'm out of breath. Almost 12,000 feet. All right, let me back it up. Oh, other cool thing. Yeah, digital camera. I love those, especially when I'm running into a tree already. Look at this. See what I mean? This is what I'm talking about. It's such a wide monster of a truck that it's very simple to get this thing pinstriped, which we don't want to do because this belongs to General Motors, so we don't want to pinstripe this. But good cameras, you can see where I'm backing up. It says I'm about to hit something. My seat is vibrating. I think that's just the tree being picked up by the sensor, which is fine because I'm not going to hit the tree. We'll just back it up out of here, nice and easy. Looking at the cameras, looking back at the trail. Yeah, looking at that camera. And then we'll head on up the trail and we'll talk about how this drives compared to the Rivian and the Lightning. All right, so here we go. So the biggest downside of this truck is it's just super wide. And this is Deer Creek, this trail that we're on, is actually a very wide trail, so it's almost suited like a glove to this truck. But yeah, it can be a question of threading a camel through the eye of a needle sometimes when you're driving this. Now, I did not air down because you really don't need to air down for this. And even without airing down, this air suspension, even at its off-road height, is very good. It's very supple. And if you were to take these 35s down to like 15 PSI, this would be super squishy and comfortable. Now, the other thing that I'm not in love with when it comes to electric trucks, and this is all electric trucks, and actually most electric off-road vehicles that I've experienced, and that is, in a regular car, you'll have basically a torque converter, which gives you a little bit of slop in the drivetrain. So when you press down on the accelerator pedal, what you end up with is just a little bit of like dead pedal before actually the wheel starts spinning. In this truck, along with all the other electric trucks, instantaneous torque means you get kind of this herky-jerky throttle. And I would love to see throttle mapping that takes account for that. And you can see right now what I'm doing. I'm kind of like, it's kind of stop-start. And that's not exactly how you really want to go off-road. You want to be as smooth as possible. The other thing we figured out going up a much harder trail, like I said, red cone, was that you need momentum because 9,000 pounds going up a steep hill does tend to be, well, very difficult to some extent. Luckily, with a little bit of momentum with the way you drive, then you can do it. But the problem is with momentum, you also then risk, of course, taking out a tree or the side of your truck. So both kind of an upside and a downside. Now, if you're wondering how much energy we're using, you'll have to go over to that. See, there you go. I'm gonna hit a little bit of tree there, and here it gets very tight. Now, this is the coolest part. So I can demonstrate both the up and the downside. So let me make this turn, which is very sharp, and usually not this one, but the next one, I would have to actually do like a 3-point turn. But because of rear wheel steering, let me see if I can put the camera out there so you can see it. Well, there you have it. Got a little stuck, but you can see those rear wheel steering. I have not locked up my diffs because I really don't need to lock up my diffs here. They're still open. But yeah, makes navigating these very tight turns just a breeze. So you've got a truck that's the size of a heavy-duty truck. Heavy-duty, of course, are like Ram 2500 that then becomes much smaller in real life. So that's the upside of this. But yeah, a little too much torque. And let me put a number to that. This Hummer EV will do 0 to 60 in well under 4 seconds, like 3.5. And to accomplish that, it has over or about 1,000 horsepower. So, you know, the last thing you need when you're, see, here's how it's going to get tight. See, I might actually risk hitting the side a little bit and doing a little bit of pinstriping. Yeah, you don't need 1,000 pound-foot of torque to go off-road. In fact, you don't need that much at all because you're going so slowly. There's that saying in the Land Rover world, as slow as necessary as oh, and I'm gonna forget because I'm all worried about this next tree and actually how tight this is gonna be. Let's see what happens here. I think I'm gonna do a little bit of, yeah, I'm gonna hit it just a little bit. So it's as fast as necessary. Oh, no, it's as slow as possible, as fast as necessary. There we go. Now I've got my brain back on. But in the Hummer, it's maybe as slow as possible and fast as necessary. Otherwise, it just tend to spin its wheels when you're going up loose dirt and rocks, even with 35s. All right. So like I was saying, how does this compare to the Rivian that we just saw? It's a much bigger, much heavier, much wider beast, and in some ways, much more tricky to off-road because it takes a little bit more skill to thread the needle than that vehicle. They both have air suspension. They both are electric. 4 motors versus 3. I'm not sure that matters very much. They both have a very similar type of throttle response. Braking is, also very similar because you've got regenerative braking or you've got regular braking. This just feels much heavier. So, think of that Rivian as the Sprinter. No, actually think of that as the Decathlete and think of this as a Sprinter. So, much beefier, much bigger, much stronger, but at the same time, much more singularly focused on actually trying to take this big old heavy truck off-road. Is it worth, let's say, $20,000 more? Well, it depends how much a convertible is worth to you. Jeep Wranglers are valuable because not only are they lifestyle vehicles, but they're also convertibles. And on a beautiful day like this, being able to take the top off certainly commands a premium. Now, I don't think that this Hummer actually competes directly with the Rivian. I'm not sure people are cross-shopping this. This has become much more of a lifestyle vehicle than it has actually a work truck. With the size of the bed, especially taken up by that spare tire. And by the way, don't go off-roading without a spare tire. So you're pretty much stuck with having that spare tire in the bed because you want one. Because you would not want to drag this thing down the mountain on a flat tire. I don't know if you'd want to actually even change a 9,500 pound truck's flat tire. That's a whole other thing. Maybe a video we'll do at some point. But I think this competes more with vehicles like the G-Wagon maybe even like a Porsche 911. In some ways, this is a toy. Now, a lot of people will be saying, like, only America, this is so true, could build an electric vehicle that then becomes kind of this poster child for conspicuous consumption, right? I mean, the great thing about electric vehicles in a lot of people's minds is that they're green. And now you've got the least green, the most American of all. I mean, you're probably going to need a giant power plant to power this thing overnight, because basically the battery is at least 2.5 times as big as most EVs, if not, 2 times. So yeah, that means that there are compromises. It takes a lot. Big battery is great, but it takes a lot longer for it to charge up. So most people charge up their vehicles overnight, but when you gotta, let's say it's half empty and you gotta fill up, juice up 100 kilowatt hour battery at night on a level 2 charger, can you even do that? Hard to say. That's why we're going to be testing this. But overall, I love this thing because it's just, crazy. I love vehicles that shouldn't exist. I love vehicles where, the engineering part of it is so off the scale, where it does things it shouldn't do, which this does. Like taking a 9,000 pound Hummer EV off-road. And it does, pushes the bounds of what the technology can do. So look at the height on that thing. Look at that. Look how tall that is. It's just such a wacky thing, in a good way, that I can't help but actually fall in love with it. So if it were my money, yes, I would definitely buy a Hummer EV, because, like I say, I love big, crazy trucks. Now you may be wondering, what about a TRX or a Raptor R? In a straight line, this will kill them. That simple. Off-road, I think the weight is detrimental. So those might be a little bit better off-road. But it's great that we have choice, at least now. I love the fact that you can have this or a Raptor R if it were here, or a TRX, and you can choose. We're living in some interesting times, folks. And by that, I mean good times right now. And that may change, but let's enjoy it while we can. So choice, I'm all about it. And if you could get one of these, if you can afford one of these, heck, get yourself one of these. As always, this is Roman. Come back, please, to alltfl.com when we post our red cone video, because that was a heavy lift. That is a meme-worthy video. I'm not going to spill the beans, but certainly interesting things happened in that video with this truck. And, of course, there's that, I think, Chinese proverb, maybe we live in interesting times. So by interesting, I don't mean grand, but interesting. All right, see you guys next time. Ciao.